Back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and we got a ton of things to get into coming off of the Orlando Magic's blowout victory over the Philadelphia 76ers. But before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, trying to do it before the end of 2025. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Again, not going to bury the lead here at all. Magic absolutely dominate 144 to 103 on the road against the Philadelphia 76ers, dropping 86 points in the first half, a franchise record. And most importantly, obviously, this is the game. This is the game where no Joel Embiid, no Paul George, no VJ Edgecombe. It felt like it was supposed to be an absolute track meet, and that's exactly what it played out to be. I believe there were nine players for the Orlando Magic that scored in double figures, with the leader of all of them being Anthony Black, who scored 31 points off the bench. And he played an integral role in what was a very up-tempo basketball game. This Orlando Magic team got up over 100 shots in this game, a feat I think they haven't accomplished so far this season, or if they have, it's only been one other time that they've eclipsed 100 shots in a game. They've always kind of floated around the 83 to 95 territory. And they did this in a game that you have to remember, Paolo Banchero has still been out with the groin injury. Definitely has lasted a lot longer than I anticipated. You guys know a couple episodes back, my prediction, so to speak, was that the last game that he would likely miss would have been the Golden State Warriors game. That's a little ways. We're a little ways from that now. So a little bit of concern, but I would also say there's a certain aspect of it where you just have to look at it as them trying to bring him along slowly and understanding that while this team is rolling, there's no necessary need, there's no real need to push for him to come back faster than when he's ready. There's not really too many statistics to get into as far as this game, given just how lopsided it was. For the Philadelphia 76ers, it was pretty much Tyrese Maxey with 20 points and nothing else really across the board. Offensively for the Orlando Magic, I think the most important thing was they shot 38% from beyond the arc, and something that I thought was very important, something they've been preaching a lot so far this season, is being able to create points off of turnovers. They won the points off of turnovers battle 36-12, forcing 21 turnovers, a great representation that the defensive identity they've reestablished was the missing piece. As far as some of the individual stats, I mentioned Anthony Black and Franz Wagner already. Desmond Bane had 15 points and 6 assists in this game. Jet Howard contributed 13 points off the bench in 18 minutes. Tyus Jones had a very nice sighting with 10 points of his own and knocked down 2 3-point attempts. Noah Penda came off the bench and had 10 points and 9 rebounds. Same said for Goga Batadze, 10 points and 9 rebounds, both playing about 20 minutes. Jace Richardson got in on the fun with 7 points himself. So it was overall collective effort, but I think it was a game that the Orlando Magic first needed to avenge because they lost to the Philadelphia 76ers earlier in the season, in a game that felt like it was very attainable. But B, I think this was a game where when you just look at the circumstances for the Sixers, this was ready-made for the Orlando Magic to have a field day, and it was just going to come down to whether or not they were going to play down to their competition. They played above, and they played like a team that's supposed to win these games, right? The championship caliber teams win the games that they're supposed to, and then survive the games that maybe they're supposed to be, maybe they're the underdogs in, or they triumph in games where the skill gap, the talent gap between them and the other team is maybe a little bit closer, right? So this is one of those games, this is one of those gimme games that the Orlando Magic needed to have, and they got the job done. Something that ended up happening in this game that I don't want to gloss over, but I actually kind of want to pour into, is Wendell Carter Jr.'s altercation, so to speak, with Andre Drummond, along with Jalen Suggs interjecting himself into said altercation and eventually leading to himself being ejected from the game. And Jalen Suggs had 11 assists by the time he was ejected. This was at the back half of the second quarter, going into half. And I want to say that something that was very important about this moment is these are situations that make your team better down the stretch. I want to read something that Jalen Suggs said after the game that I think is just so important for the construct of this team moving forward. And I don't mean physical makeup. I mean in terms of their mental makeup as a team, trying to build themselves towards something bigger than what this franchise has been used to over the last decade or so, right? And what he said was, he said he has no regrets and would do it again 10 times out of 10. In my opinion, squaring up is a little too crazy. So that in the moments that preceded. They were what they were. I don't regret it. I'll stick up for my brother every time. I'll take the fine. Don't think I should have gotten ejected, but I'll take it. I'm not going to argue with their call, so we move on. I don't have no hard feelings towards nobody. And the long and short of it, obviously, was the altercation was started by a little bit of bumping and jawing back and forth here and there, and Andre Drummond squared up. And actually, Wendell Carter Jr. looked him dead in his face with his hands still down. Something I think that was also very telling, because there's a certain toughness element to this team paired with Suggs coming in and interjecting himself as well, that I think this team needs moments like those. And I'm not endorsing the idea of violence. I'm not endorsing the idea of this team trying to, get in situations where they constantly have to defend themselves or put themselves in position where they're jawing at other teams because they have to create some kind of edge, right? But I do think there's a certain element of physicality that this team needs to operate with. It. It's not just how they play, but I think it's how they carry themselves. And this is one of those moments where, again, I think the brotherhood aspect of Jalen Suggs, this is one of those reasons why when we talk about big name trades, right, your LaMelo Balls, your Darius Garlands, you look at those trades and you ask yourself, how much more are you losing than just a talent perspective from what Jalen Suggs brings defensively if you were to have to move off of Jalen Suggs in a trade? It's moments like these, like does LaMelo Ball do the same thing? Does Darius Garland do the same thing? And I'm not trying to question the heart of those guys, but I'm asking for somebody that has this relationship with these guys pre-built in, somebody that's went to war in the postseason with these guys, somebody that's grown and developed in this organization around these guys in this way and set the tone as a real heartbeat for this team. And a lot of people acknowledge that about Jalen Suggs. What more are you losing than just a guy who shoots 38% from beyond the arc and could be one of the best perimeter defenders in the league? Because don't get me wrong, you don't want to shortchange him by calling him that. That means a lot in today's NBA to be considered an elite level defender at the point guard position. There's not too many names that tend to lead themselves in today's NBA with what they do on the defensive end at the guard spot. A lot of it is built off of how they're able to shoot the ball or how they're able to score the ball or how they're able to dunk the ball. It's a lot about how they're able to create scoring opportunities and highlights. But in reality, Jalen Suggs brings a completely different intangible, one that I think is very lost in today's NBA and only very few guards really still embody. I think somebody like Dyson Daniels for Atlanta, for example, is another guy that I think kind of gets the memo. But I think the difference between somebody like Dyson and someone like Jalen Suggs is there's a certain passionate aspect that, yes, he wears on his sleeve, but I think also really represents what Orlando Magic basketball should be about. In this time frame where they're so youthful, where they're so athletic, where they have the defensive upside of being able to play really strong together because everybody can move well laterally. Everybody has real tenacity on ball and in the zone defense to play passing lanes and things like that. Like he is a very strong embodiment of what I think Jamal Mosley has tried to implement in this Orlando Magic organization since taking over as the head coach. I think if there was anybody that operates as like the quote unquote mouthpiece of Jamal Mosley's philosophy for this team, I think it actually is Jalen Suggs. And I think moments like these, you have to be proud of somebody like Wendell Carter Jr. as well, not backing down, not allowing the moment to overwhelm him in a way that I think it was actually more telling that he looked him right he looked Andre Drummond right in his face, kind of almost downplaying, like, you're not gonna do anything, and even if you are, guess what? I'm about that timing. And again, I don't want to go into that too deeply because it's not, again, I don't want to be promoting violence and I'm not trying to make it seem like this is something that I want to occur on a day-to-day basis, a game-to-game basis for the Orlando Magic. But I also think it's a good character moment for this Orlando Magic team. I think it's very important, too, if you look back at the context of this game. There was a point where the Orlando Magic and the Philadelphia 76ers were tied at 35-35. And it was one of those things where, like, the game kind of flipped. And I think, as a part of that crazy first half scoring wise for them, obviously all of that wasn't a product of responding to that altercation between those two. Actually, a good portion of it was done prior to the altercation. But I think keeping their foot on the gas and doubling down in the second half and probably being just as equally impressive despite not scoring as much as 86 in the first half, despite the fact that they didn't eclipse that number, I think they did it in a way with the downhill play, with the focus on offensive rebounding, all of the paint touches, the constant deflection, the constant hounding, on the perimeter. I think all of those things were representations of like responding in the right way to losing your vocal leader on the floor in that moment. Like instead of responding to Jalen Suggs being ejected by being deflated by the confusion of why it was that he was sent out of the game, despite the fact that all he did was stand up for a teammate, they responded by doing what he would do, which essentially is play tenacious defense, continue to talk, continue to chirp, continue to put the pressure on to let them know that, like, I'm not backing down away from this confrontation. I'm not backing down away from this situation that's presented to me, which is a team that thinks they can push us around, that thinks that when things get out of hand that they have the upper hand. And I think that was a good character moment for this Orlando Magic team. But another thing that I thought was very impressive, and probably the most impressive thing for this team in the game, again, when it's this lopsided, is there a ton of analysis to provide? Not necessarily, because the Orlando Magic simply just dominated in all facets of the game. If you go through everything in terms of the numbers, comparing team to team, shooting from the field, 53.5% to Philadelphia's 45%. Three-point shooting, 38% to Philadelphia's 36%. Free throw percentage, Philadelphia beat them shooting 91% to Orlando's 82%. But Orlando got to the free throw line 6 more times. In terms of total rebounding, 47 to 38. In terms of offensive rebounding, 15 to 8. Assists, 38 to 22. Turnovers, Orlando only had 11. Philadelphia had 21. Fast break points, 25 to 15. Points in the paint, 80 to 56. Right? So if you go down the entire score sheet here, everything says the Orlando Magic just simply dominated this game. And again, it's also very hard to really analyze this game in crazy depth when they don't play with VJ Edgecombe. They don't have Paul George. They don't have Joel Embiid. So the overall game plan is if you keep Maxey quiet, everything else kind of works around, and that's exactly what happened. The next leading scorer outside of Tyrese Maxey was Jared McCain with 15 points in 25 minutes. Off the bench. There was a complete collapse offensively, as far as anybody being able to really provide, a Robin to Tyrese Maxey's Batman offensively. And part of that is the Orlando Magic shutting the water off. Part of that is just the fact that they didn't have the talent to truly compete with the Orlando Magic in this game, given their lack of depth going in. So something else that kind of really stood out to me, I guess, amongst all of that is the bench scoring. The bench scoring was something that I think is going to be a narrative we have to keep tabs on a lot during the season. And it's funny, I was doing the Daily Picks Challenge short form videos for one of the other podcasts that I record with a friend. It's something that we do for social media, where we do parlay preps and things of that nature on TikTok, and we basically do like 2 games and a player prop. And I remember I picked the Orlando Magic to win this game comfortably. And I remember something that I had said kind of in passing, as part of what I thought was going to be a big portion of this game, was like, watch out for Anthony Black. Like, I just think that he's going to be somebody that you have to really keep tabs on. And I've said it on this podcast plenty of times that I think that Anthony Black is going to be the X factor for this team. But I just thought it was really ironic that I kind of said that again in passing as somebody that I thought would be an interesting standout player in this game. I didn't think there was going to be really any guard that could cover Anthony Black in space. And I thought, potentially in a situation where he plays, significant minutes as he's been doing, and he played 28 in this game, and a lot of that ended up being made up on the back end of, Jalen Suggs being ejected, because Jalen Suggs did start in this game. He played 16 minutes. But in that time, in that 28 minutes, he made the absolute most of it. Only took, He made 12 shots, and he put himself in a position to be have one of the best plus minuses on the floor. He was a plus 31, which was second best, only to Wendell Carter Jr. But again, 86 points off the bench is that's maddening when you think about what the Orlando Magic can do from a pressure perspective. You already know how talented their starting five is when healthy. When healthy, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. You can make an argument that's a top five to top 8 starting five in the NBA from a talent perspective. Now, if you're able to add real bench scoring, again, once upon a time when Mo Wagner was healthy, I always reference this stat because I think it's something that's going to be an important aspect later on, especially when he does get right, is there was a point back when Mo Wagner was healthy, if it wasn't last season, I believe it was the season prior, where the Orlando Magic finished the season fourth in bench scoring in the NBA. And I believe that one of the biggest factors for this Orlando Magic team in terms of being able to get through what is going to be a grueling regular season. I think the next man up mentality built around this Paulo Banchero injury has also forced a play style for the Orlando Magic that's put them in position to play more together and force themselves to be able to rely on these young guys a little bit more. I think something that I think really stood out to me in this game was we talked about it last podcast of the idea of not relying too much on the veteranship, right, of guys like Jonathan Isaac and guys like Tyus Jones from the perspective of like let the young guys run. Like if the young guys are playing well, or if there's an upside that you haven't seen yet or haven't given the chance to see yet, this is an opportunity to really kind of lean into that while we're still in the early portion of the season. This was an NBA Cup game, so there was real implications. Actually winning by winning by 41 is really important in terms of the point differential aspect of the NBA Cup. We don't talk about the NBA Cup too much on the podcast because I'm not gonna lie, I see all the games as the same. For the most part, I think once you start to get more into the tournament aspect of it, like how the Toronto Raptors, I believe they've already clinched a quarterfinal spot, right? Once you get into the tournament aspect of it, I guess you can give it a little bit more merit. But in the flow of the season, I still kind of just see these as regular games. But Tyus Jones played 16 minutes. Jet Howard played 18. Jace Richardson got 10. Noah Pinda played 22. Goga played 20. Jonathan Isaac didn't play, but I believe he was dealing with an injury himself in this game. So this was a chance. And again, this was a blowout victory. You're playing an undermanned Philadelphia 76ers team. You don't want to overblow it in terms of some decisions that are being made. But I do like the fact that Jamal Mosley is taking this time to lean more into the young guys and trying to see what it is that he has and trying to see how they gel with this more up-tempo play style. And I think they've all really taken to it well in terms of taking advantage of their opportunities. I don't think it should be undermined that someone like Jet Howard is coming in and not afraid to take shots at a high clip right out the gate. I think it should be commended that Noah Pinda is taking pride coming on the floor in limited minutes. Again, 22 minutes on the floor. And rebounding at a high level. He played 22 minutes was the second most of any player off the bench not named Anthony Black. That's important that these guys are starting to get an understanding of what their role is, because I think it's also going to help in terms of really defining what this 8 to 9 man rotation looks like when it comes playoff time. You have to figure out what you have, and I think it's hard to figure that out when you can rely on somebody as dominant as Paulo Banchero can be when he's really rolling. Again, this is a guy who slows the game down a lot in the half court. He's somebody who gets to the free throw line a lot. He's very talented in terms of the type of defensive pressure that he requires in order to like contain him, right? And so sometimes it can take away from showing what other guys really are capable of doing, especially on that offensive end. And I think now, with his absence, you're getting to see that a little bit more. And I don't think that this team is better without Paulo Banchero, not by any means. Personally, I feel like this is a good case of understanding just how high your floor is and then realizing just how much higher your ceiling is when you add a player of that caliber back into your lineup, right? So I think that this bench mob thing that we're starting to see over the last few games, especially with the way that Anthony Black has been able to take over, has been really important. And what he's done this season, again, he's going to be somebody that maybe does not get as much Sixth Man of the Year buzz as others. But he should be on that short list. I think Anthony Black is deserving of being somebody that should be in that top 5 to top 6, 7 conversation, and as far as Sixth Man of the Year. And I think he's somebody else that we have to have a real conversation about him as a most improved candidate. Of course, the leaders of the most improved fan clubs are going to be guys that are just kind of like doing it a completely different way or doing it with much more significant counting stats, right? Denny Avdia, Ryan Rollins. They're guys that are Ryan is coming from the underdog story of being a guy who was kind of, thrown as the secondary chip in a lot of trades that didn't have a lot of name value, and is really starting to thrive in Milwaukee. Or Denny Avdia this season is putting up all-star caliber numbers this year as a guy who's really starting to kind of come into his own in Portland after showing flashes of this with Washington, but now really coming into his own as like a true leader, offensively and to a certain extent defensively as well for the Portland Trailblazers. I think Anthony Black is doing it his own way too, right? He's coming off of the bench and he's providing a lot of what Jalen Suggs provides, but he's doing it. I think he's being very aggressive offensively. He's being much more aggressive offensively. I think what he's been able to do as far as defensive pressure has been really important in terms of his fit on the perimeter next to a Desmond Bane, next to a Tyus Jones, next to a Jet Howard, right? I think his fit, he's made himself permeable, right? Or malleable, I think is maybe the better word, right? Where he fits very well next to a lot of different lineups. And I think the only thing that's really holding Anthony Black now is just that, like, his consistency from beyond the arc. When they win, he's killing it from beyond the arc. But when they lose, a lot of that is attributed, or not a lot of it, but one of the things you can attribute to it is that Anthony Black has been much more open to knocking down those threes, but or taking those threes, I should say. But as far as knocking them down, when he struggles, it creates a different element, because this team has 3-point shooters, and Anthony Black, I think, is a capable 3-point shooter. But I think once he becomes to the point of being truly consistent, that'll be when the conversation starts to lean much, much more in his favor. Because I think the shooting splits themselves have not necessarily changed drastically, but I think his overall productivity and his impact, his actual impact on the floor, is one of those that feels like he should be in that conversation as far as most improved. And definitely from a six-man of the year candidate perspective, I think if guys like Alex Caruso, for example, gets a lot of love in this category, and it's not because of what he does statistically, it's about what his importance to this team is as the first guy up off the bench, and the kind of pressure that he brings, and the play style that he's able to adapt to, and the play style that he brings to the table, with the guys around him having to pick up their defensive pressure, with the guys around him having to knock down their three-point shots, because he creates so many opportunities off of deflections and steals and stuff like that. I think Anthony Black is a lot of what that archetype of a six-man is in today's NBA. And I would make the argument, you guys let me know in the comment section down below, I believe that version of a six-man is equally, if not as important as your fill it up off the bench, I score 18 points a game, six-man of the year candidate that we've always been so used to in the past. The guy whoever scores the most coming off the bench is the six-man of the year leading candidate. To me, I don't think that's what this version of the NBA is about anymore. I mean, if you just if you go on ESPN and you type in, scoring leaders, scoring stat leaders, and you go to the scoring area and you scroll down, watch how far you have to scroll before you get to the first guy averaging less than 20 points per game. I mean, you'll get into like the 40s before you get to the point where guys aren't averaging at least, 20 a game. And so when you really think about that, scoring 18 off the bench, I'm not saying it's not impressive by any means, but the idea in a more inflated offensive league, dropping 18 points off the bench is highly contributive to your team, and it can be very helpful to your team's success. But I don't think it tells the whole narrative of how important you are to your roster, as opposed to somebody like an Anthony Black, like an Alex Caruso, that provides so much more than just being able to score the basketball. So, again, I've said it a million times on the podcast, and I stick to it. I believe that the impact of Anthony Black and the X Factor aspect of Anthony Black is going to be one of the most important things this season for the Orlando Magic. Last but not least, let's go ahead and read a couple of you guys' comments from last podcast. You guys were very active. I really, really appreciate it. And I apologize to anybody if they felt like there was any kind of hostility built in last episode. I really genuinely didn't want it to, and I I don't think I came off as hostile, but I do know that a lot of the podcast was geared towards responding to comments, both good and negative. But I hope that we were able to have a relatively constructive conversation within the podcast because, again, one of the biggest things that I think is so important is this is a community first. To me, I believe in the idea of building this podcast around you guys' feelings and beliefs related to the Orlando Magic. Am I favored to, people questioning my basketball intelligence and things of that nature? No. But at the same time, I also understand that you have a certain opinion around your team that may differ from mine. And I think it's better to have an open discourse about that than just being mad and just reading comments and being salty and not really addressing the fact that at the end of the day, whether your feelings towards me in these comments are one thing, but I think your feelings expressed about the Orlando Magic within those comments is actually what I think is more important. So let's just go down. Let's start from top and work our way down to the bottom. User Joe, I'm gonna say user Joey 3L4P says nice Christmas tree, bro. Thank you. Karen Kindler 834. Shout out to you. Says Isaac is a great defender. He can dribble, rebound, pass, shoot, block, and he has very active hands, so he can break up plays. You're looking at numbers, watching play. He may not play as much as you would like, but when he does most games, he is strong in defense. And I totally agree with that. I don't want that to be lost on that my opinions about Jonathan Isaac are strictly based off of his actual productivity, not about what I think he's capable of. A lot of what he's able to do, the upside of Jonathan Isaac, is not necessarily theoretical, but it is something that is leaning more on what you've seen from him in the past, more than what you've seen from him consistently throughout this regular season and even dating back to last year. His limited minutes put in a position where you're seeing Jonathan Isaac more within the frame of what he does in flashes as opposed to what he does consistently. I think the main thing is I try to take a similar approach to Jonathan Isaac that I've taken when it comes to someone like Jet Howard. I want to be very consistent, right? The idea around trading those guys has nothing to do with whether or not I think they're talented or not. It has to do with what their productivity looks like for this Orlando Magic team in conjunction with what their value is. Jonathan Isaac is going to be considered a trade asset because he's owed $14 to $15 million over the next 3 seasons. And if you're not going to trade Desmond Bane, you're not going to trade Jalen Suggs, you're not going to trade Wendell Carter Jr., you're not going to trade Franz, you're not going to trade Paulo Banchero. Let's say the entire starting five is untouchable. Who's the first guy you think the Orlando Magic would consider trading? I think Anthony Black's untouchable. I think Jace Richardson is relatively safe, right? I think those two guys are safe. So then you get to Tyus Jones. Well, he's only signed for 1 year and he's on a $7 million deal. He's going to have to be paired with somebody or paired with a significant draft pick, something the Orlando Magic don't really have because I believe the only draft pick they have available to trade as a first rounder is 2031. So attaching $7 million in a first round draft pick, even highly valuable, isn't going to get you a great asset back. So as far as value is considered, I pointed out on Spotrac the other day that Jonathan Isaac is the 4th highest paid player on this team, paid higher than Paulo Banchero even this season, paid higher than Goga Batazde and Wendell Carter Jr. combined, or nearly. I believe those two are a combined $18 million. And again, like I mentioned, Jonathan Isaac is making $14 to $15 million. So it's more about identifying his value in relation to this team, where if you're going to any trade for the Orlando Magic, and again, this is why I asked you guys last episode, like if you guys don't want to have as many conversations about trades, that's totally fine by me, but you have to understand that if Franz is untouchable in your mind, if Paulo's untouchable in your mind, if Jalen Suggs is untouchable in your mind, they just grabbed Desmond Bane. I don't see them reflipping him. And Wendell Carter Jr., as far as we're concerned, is safe. You're looking at the bench in terms of what can be flippable in order to upgrade portions of this roster. The first name that's going to come up just financially is going to be Jonathan Isaac. It's not necessarily about my lack of belief in him, although I do think his lack of consistent production is something that makes him expendable. Yes, if you play less than 15 minutes a game, if you play as many minutes per game as you are paid millions of dollars on a season-to-season basis, yes, you are an expendable asset. You play $15 to $16 million. You you are paid $15 to $16 million or $14 to $15 million a year, and you play 15 to 16 minutes a game. Yes, that makes you expendable. That makes you an expendable asset as far as the contract to productivity is concerned. As far as what his actual upside is, we know that Jonathan Isaac has significant upside as a defensive player. We know what he brings to the table as a rim protector. We know that in the postseason, he's somebody that if you were to run into Joel Embiid, or you were to run into a Karl Anthony Towns, a Anthony Davis, if he ends up being the guy for the New York Knicks. If you run into an Evan Mobley, a Jared Allen, those are matchups where, yes, you would favor having a guy like Jonathan Isaac on the floor. I genuinely believe that. I agree with that. I also think that anytime we have a conversation about making a trade, Jonathan Isaac is going to be the first name up, because from a contract standpoint, especially with a lot of these other teams that would be salary dumping, the idea is not to take on too much bad salary, but they also, if we're going to get a significant asset in return, it's going to require having to send a significant asset out, usually in the form of some kind of higher salary. Jonathan Isaac is the only high salary that, if you look at the Orlando Magic's roster, they truly would be willing to let go, or truly does not have the merit to be considered untouchable. So that's what I would say for that. Alpha Melanin says, thanks for the shout. Yeah, I talked about him a lot last podcast. He said, we need to call the Kings ASAP. J.I. for Schroeder. He makes just under 15 mil per year, right around the same spot that Jonathan Isaac makes as well. Throw in a couple of seconds to sweeten the deal, since they are going to be on a rebuild soon anyways. He is my first choice over Tyus signing. Although the money he signed for priced him out of our range, he matches the salary with J.I. almost perfectly. The German connection with Franz, Mo, and TDS instantly makes any group on the floor better. Watching them all together during FIBA was certainly a treat. Wouldn't mind watching that cohesion during the season. That came from Melina Transu 2660. Shout out to both of you, right? I think this is a great point. And Dennis Schroeder came up. Actually during the FIBA tourney. No. He came up plenty during its FIBA tourney, but actually Dennis Schroeder's name came up a pretty decent amount prior to Tyus Jones being picked up, because of that very connection with Franz, with TDS, with Mo. And I think that, again, now you have to ask yourself what the significance of adding another guard to this team is in comparison to getting another true rim protector to make up for the fact that you are trading off of J.I. And that's the give and take, right, of moving off of Jonathan Isaac. Is the idea would be to upgrade in some shape or form what your rim protection looks like, because at the end of the day, you're giving up someone that, when he does play, provides real high level rim protection. But I think that the contract for contract aspect of it is very true and needs to be acknowledged. Again, I'm so glad that Alpha Melon has spelled this out, because I think it's a great representation of what I was just saying, which is Jonathan Isaac's name is only at the top of trade conversations when it comes to the Orlando Magic, because any trade the Orlando Magic make from a salary perspective usually will start and end with Jonathan Isaac being attached to some version of a young player or some kind of future draft capital to help sweeten up the deal. But his contract itself is one of the most lucrative contracts on the roster as far as it being movable. Anthony Black is still paid a relatively low salary NBA standards. Tyus Jones is on an expiring deal for only $7 million. It's not like he signed the true taxpayer MLE, where he's floating around the $15 million mark, right? That would make him a lot more movable, similar to Jonathan Isaac. Jace Richardson's on a rookie scale contract right now. Jet Howard they had to pick up his club option for this year in order for him to return for this year, and I believe he'll be a restricted free agent this upcoming summer. So, like, when you look at the contracts of what they do and don't have available for them to move, Jonathan Isaac is the only guy. But I think also, again, Dennis Schroeder is an interesting name because I think of his fit, but I think Dennis Schroeder is also, you have to question, again, with Jonathan Isaac, you're giving up rim protection. Can you rely on Wendell Carter Jr.? Can you rely on Goga Batazde to make up for that? Because the depth for the front court as far as rim protection is concerned is a smidget thin and does get a little bit thinner without J.I. I'm not saying J.I. should be traded necessarily. I just think that they either need to figure out what they have in Noah Penda to truly make Jonathan Isaac expendable, or Jonathan Isaac just needs to play more. I think it's one of the two. I think if Jonathan Isaac's barely going to play, let Noah Penda get some of that burn so we can figure out what we have in him. Or if Jonathan Isaac is healthy enough to play, let him play enough to show the $14 to $15 million man that he is as a rim protector, who I do believe on a per minute basis, at least defensively, is still a top 5 player in the NBA as far as rim protection is considered, again, on a per minute basis. I think it's very important. Let's talk about Luis Rosario said, let's keep up with the week-to-week stuff and growth of this team, especially after the Cup tournament. Let's keep focused on the near future and what we need to improve to get to the ECF and the NBA Finals. Talking about not necessarily, I asked a question about whether or not this team should make any real trades at the trade deadline, or should they stay pat and just see what they have in their roster for this year and then figure out what adjustments need to be made after whatever the results of this year are. So stand pat, it sounds like. KJB Christian says, you're doing a great job. The more people watch, the more haters. Oh, okay, that's probably in response to the fact that I kind of touched on a few people in the comment section who kind of, again, question my basketball intelligence a little bit. But, again, I don't take it as anything personal. I feel like it's more of a chance just to create another conversation, right? If you feel as though I'm wrong, or you think that I have a bad take on something, that's totally fine. Again, the comment is appreciated. Engagement is engagement. But I also think it creates a talking point for us to be able to have a conversation on the podcast. Karen Kindler comes back in and says, Jones just needs more minutes. He's a true floor general. Plus, he's a great teacher to our guards. He can make baskets, but he's a very good passer. I totally agree with you. There's nothing about Tyus that I don't believe in. I've said it a million times. I'll continue to say it probably throughout the entire year as long as he's on our roster. Tyus Jones is my favorite backup point guard in the NBA. It's been this way for the better part of the last 5 years. Is Tyus Jones has just been one of my more favorite backup point guards in the NBA. It's one of my favorite archetypes in NBA history is the facilitating point guard. Your Jason Kidds, your Rajon Rondos. My favorite player of all time is Derrick Rose, not necessarily a facilitator in terms of his play style, but if you listen to him talk, he's a pass-first point guard. I know he didn't play like that with the Chicago Bulls, but, I mean, let's be honest, the passing options he had, it kind of forced him to have to be a takeover scorer. That's a conversation for a totally different day, but the pass-first point guard has always been an intriguing art to me, right? That's why I still very much favor guys like Chris Paul and Tyrese Halliburton even. So I think that, Tyus Jones, he's in that mold of quarterback type point guard. And so I like what he brings to the table. It's his lack of consistency this season is the thing that's making it hard to watch him play right now. And he had a good game against Philadelphia. But again, you do have to acknowledge in this quest to figure out who your true 8 to 9 man rotation is. Do I believe that Tyus will end up cracking that rotation? I think that's going to have a lot to do with whether or not he can outbeat guys like Jet Howard and Jace Richardson, who are playing really, really well when they do get on the floor. They play with a certain level of urgency. I think Jet Howard, to an extent, he's auditioning, right? Whether it's for a long-term contract with this team or for a next team, Jet Howard is essentially auditioning to a certain extent. He has a very limited sample size of what he's been able to do on the floor up till this point. And so now he's playing for a position to put himself in the space to make good money on what would be his, his first real contract in the NBA, right? So he's playing with a certain level of hair on fire. I think Jace Richardson is playing with something to prove as somebody who was taken a lot later than some of the draft boards projected him to be. He was somebody that was projected to maybe be taken as high as the lottery. It was taken much later than that, being taken in the 20s. So I think it's very important when you think about where this team is, that it's gonna come down to who the best player is. I think that something that I've tried to preach a lot is, as much as I love Tyus, it needs to be about what your productivity is, not about being favored as the veteran in the room. Being a veteran doesn't mean anything if you're not productive. I think I've said the same thing about Jonathan Isaac. You only play 15 minutes a game. You can be a big voice in the room all you want to, but when we try to match your voice with your productivity, when they don't line up, it makes us question if there's somebody else better to fit. So I believe in Tyus just as much as anybody. You don't have to convince me. Luis Rosario said once again, Jet was drafted as a gift to Juwan Howard because Weltman was Howard's GM when he played with Denver. Not going to touch on that one very much, but there was a lot of conspiracy theory around the time when Jet was taken that he was taken significantly high because of backdoor ties. This would be the front runner for that. D'Lo, Florida, Orlando needs to get on the phone with the Kings. I'll take Ellis, Monk, or Schroeder. That's all I'm saying. The Kings are on fire sale mode, and I think all three of those guys are available. Keon Ellis would be my favorite of the group just because of what I think he brings to the table without needing to demand the ball very much. Malik Monk would probably be the most talented of the group in terms of what he brings to the table. And Dennis Schroeder would probably be the most malleable. He'd probably be the guy that fits the most within the scheme they're trying to play and fit around guys like Franz and TDS, who they already have a rapport, so it would work really well. So I would probably take them exactly in the order that you listed them. As far as how I think they would fit on this team, I think Malik Monk presents a completely different aspect of scoring off the bench that, again, I said I think Jet Howard and Jace Richardson kind of separately but together provide, but Malik Monk would be able to do it all within just one player. I think Keon Ellis is kind of an extension of what you get from Jalen Suggs and what you get from Anthony Black defensively while also having that three-point shooting upside. And Dennis Schroeder, I think he has a lot more on-ball chops. I think he has the ability to create shots for himself, and I think he is very tenacious on the defensive end. You pair that with his synergy that he already has with a few guys already on the Orlando Magic, he would fit like a glove, I think. Sharp T9E says we're making trades because a couple of guys had good games. It's ridiculous. I don't believe I said at any point that we should be making trades. I at no point do I believe that's the case. Luis Rosario responded and said, no, we are making some trades because some people have watched enough basketball over the years. They can see the future before it truly gets here. I started in 1975 when I was 11 watching Dr. J. Luis Rosario always comes with his background. And then KJB Christian responded by saying a couple of guys have been consistently bad and other guys are stepping up when given the opportunity. I think both things can be fair. I think in one sense, nobody should just be traded because all of a sudden nobody should be traded because all of a sudden Jet Howard and Jace Richardson are getting more minutes and being productive in those minutes. I said this a lot last podcast and I stand to it. Sample size matters, right? I think that the sample size of Tyus Jones has been 18 to 20 games to tell you that we need to see what we have in some of the other guys. I think the 3 to 4 game sample size where we've seen guys like Jet Howard and Jace Richardson get significant minutes are also its own smaller sample size to take into consideration, which although I don't think it's as telling as the Tyus Jones sample size, again, because it's like 5 to 10 versus 20 in terms of how significant their minutes have been versus Tyus Jones's minutes. I think that if you're just looking at it in a vacuum right now, the idea of trading guys is only being brought up because of the mere fact that if any trade were to happen, those guys, Tyus, Jonathan Isaac, those would be the guys that, again, contract-wise would come up first. They would be the ones to come up first. But as far as me thinking they need to make a trade all of a sudden because these guys are playing well, that's silly, and I don't want to attach myself to the thought process of that being the case because I don't believe that at all. Heath Holmes 4992, shout out to you. I don't know if you're a first-time commenter. I don't feel like I've seen your name before. If you have, apologies, but if you haven't, welcome to the fan club. I don't want to hear nothing about a three-point shooter when we have enough. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm totally in agreement with that, actually. At this point, I believe that the three-point shooting is more about what their ability to do off the dribble is, right? I think that's why Malik Monk is such a fascinating player to me. Another guy that I brought up a ton is the reuniting with Victor Oladipo, right? I think their on-ball ability to shot create for themselves is kind of more of what I'm interested in now than just a pure three-point shooter. We don't need a Kevin Huerter. We don't need need a Duncan Robinson. We don't need somebody that's this like 3-point specialist truly, because I think that Tristan Da Silva brings that to the table. I think that Jalen Suggs has done a really good job on the floor of shooting the three ball at a good clip. Anthony Black is coming along very well, the 3-point shooter. Franz Wagner's 3-point shooting this season has been very, very underrated because it's on low volume, but he's hitting nearly 40%. I totally agree with you. I don't think the idea of needing to focus on 3-point shooting in any trade or any acquisition needs to be at the forefront. I think the only thing that needs to be worried about as far as making trades for anybody to make this Orlando Magic team better, and I'm talking strictly with the idea of making the Orlando Magic better, not making a trade for the sake of making a trade or making a trade for the sake of consolidating just to take the pressure off of having to figure out what your 9 to 10 man rotation is. I think if we're talking about making a trade with the intention of getting better, it's either to add more significant rim protection and size to this team, right? More true 7-footer size with rim protection upside, or more on-ball shot creation ability off the bench to help take the pressure off of guys like Desmond Bane, like Franz Wagner, to create offense when those guys aren't on the floor. I think that's why Anthony Black has been so important with what he's brought to the table so far this season. But I actually totally agree with that. I think 3-point shooting isn't really the question for this team in terms of what they do in terms of acquiring more talent. I think at this point, it's about trying to figure out more of shot creation or, again, rim protection. Those are my two most important things. If this team's going to trade for anything, shot creation and rim protection. I think that Keon Ellis, when I brought his name up as a 3-point shooter, I think that's his upside as being a plus player on the offensive end. So it doesn't just come off as him being a net negative and it's a 4-on-5 when he's on the floor. No, he's a knockdown 3-point shooter that you can trust in space, where on a kick out opportunity, he can still be a part of the flow of the offense. But it more so, Keon Ellis's pickup would be more about what he brings as a defensive player on the perimeter in the terms of how he hounds and how he's able to create so much on-ball pressure, right? For example, same thing could be said for somebody like Dennis Schroeder. Him is more about what his shot creation is and what he can do with the ball in his hands as a ball mover, and then what he does as a defender on ball, mainly because he's mainly better as an on-ball defender than he is as a defender in space. I think it's because he just plays really well with his hands more than anything. But yeah, no, I totally agree with that actually. iCobby F4Q, this is one of the guys that was very active in the comment section last episode, and this will probably be where I stop because I don't want this episode to run too much longer. It's already 46 minutes as far as I'm concerned, but this will be my last set of comments that I read, and maybe we'll pick up on this next episode as well. Or maybe I'll build next episode kind of completely around the rest of the comments that were in this video. But he says, Isaac is Orlando's best overall defender, dominated Towns and Robinson in little time against the Knicks, also did well against Şengün. Now y'all think he wasn't good enough to play against Boston, lesser quality bigs. When he plays, he shows he's their best defender. He needs rotation minutes to get in rhythm. Wait till the playoffs. Y'all will see if Penda ready or more fitting than Isaac for serious playing time. Luis Rosario responded by saying, you can't have so many high-paid players if you're not deep into the playoffs and getting results for your investment. J.I. is a great defender, but the price is too high for the amount of return on investment. If we don't control the payroll, we will suffer as fans with the players on the floor and the price of everything at the Kia Center, food, merchandise, and parking. I have been dealing with this since 1995, when we went into the finals and everything doubled in price in one season and tried to pay to play. He responded, iCobby F4Q responded by saying, if they let Isaac play more rotation minutes to get in the game rhythm, that contract situation shouldn't be a problem. Agreed. They know why they paid him that much. Again, specifically what you said, if they let Isaac play more rotation minutes to get in the game rhythm, that contract situation shouldn't be a problem. They know why they paid him that much. Suggs makes way more to have most of his opponents have big scoring games against him fans. Suggs brings energy, force, tenacity, pressure, aggressiveness, hard work, but he's not as potent as it seems on defense. He gambles and overplays his opponents, then they beat him off the dribbles for scores. For instance, when Isaac or Black steal the ball from opponents, it's like you didn't see it coming because unlike Suggs, they read defenses with composure, while Suggs gamble or use pressure, which is still good, but he be gambling, and when it works, it looks good. When it don't, they have big games against them. Just checking up on the numbers. Just saying Isaac's still important to the team. So that started about Jonathan Isaac and then turned into something about Jalen Suggs. I'm going to focus on the Jonathan Isaac aspect of it because the Jalen Suggs aspect of it is a little bit more nuanced than that. But I think the main thing is that no one's saying that Jonathan Isaac is not important, and nobody's saying that Jonathan Isaac is going to get outplayed by Noah Pinda. What I'm saying is through the course of the regular season, it's 82 games. Jonathan Isaac is on a pitch count where he's playing less than 20 minutes a game. If you're going to only play Jonathan Isaac less than 20 minutes a game, I think Noah Pinda should play. Do I think that he deserves to play more than Jonathan Isaac in a postseason setting? Probably not. He's a rookie. Do I think he's a better rim protector than Jonathan Isaac? No. He's a rookie. Do I think that Jonathan Isaac would be much more formidable in a postseason setting than Noah Pinda? Yes, because Noah Pinda is a rookie. The simplistic way of putting all of that is by saying that I believe that Jonathan Isaac has a certain upside that is very important to this roster. The question is, if there was any version of trying to upgrade this roster to go get somebody with added rim protection chops that can play more than 20 minutes a game, you wouldn't do it? That's the biggest question. If you can go get, who's a good name that I think is available truthfully? A Nicholas Claxton, for example, right? If you can get a Nicholas Claxton from the Brooklyn Nets and he gives you good rim protection stats and you know that he can play 25 plus minutes a night if you needed him to, would you take that over Jonathan Isaac, who gives you 16 minutes but maybe slightly a better rim protector? He may be slightly a better rim protector than Nicholas Claxton, but maybe an overall better defender. Let's actually put some respect on Jonathan Isaac's name and say, I think pound for pound, Jonathan Isaac is a better defender than Nicholas Claxton. But would you take 80% of what Jonathan Isaac is defensively out of Nicholas Claxton for 25 minutes a game? Or would you take Jonathan Isaac on his 15 to 16 minute pitch count at that level? I think in a postseason setting, if you're talking about 16 games to get to the NBA Finals, I totally agree with you. Through the course of an 82-game regular season, that's where the conversation becomes a little bit more dicey. And I think that's all we're really trying to say when it comes to Jonathan Isaac, because you're talking about essentially nullifying or degrading the importance of the regular season for this team for the next 3 years, because for the next 3 years, he's owed $14 to $15 million to basically be the guy that we say, let's just get you through the regular season. We'll dust you off for the postseason and hope you come out and kill defensively. And that's hard to bank on when the Eastern Conference is only going to get more and more competitive over the course of these seasons as guys like Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton come back. Guys like AJ DeBonsa and Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer get drafted, right? It's only going to become more and more competitive as we go along. So just banking on, let's get through the regular season and dust Jonathan Isaac off and he can come back in a 7-game series and be the all-world rim protector that we need him to be. That's a tough thing to just rely on to say when we get into that setting, he's just going to be ready, willing, and absolutely dominate on that side. It's a hard thing to ask, and when you're paying that much to a player, again, it might not be that much in the grand scheme of the NBA, but that much in the grand scheme of what the Orlando Magic's current cap structure, their payroll is. It is something you have to ask yourself, questions about. But neither here nor there. You guys dropped a ton of comments in the comment section. I want to read a lot more of them on my off time, and maybe I'll even build next episode, kind of build around some of the comments that are left under this episode and the episode prior as well. Drop more comments in the comment section down below about what you guys feel on the Orlando Magic so far this season, how you guys felt about the Jalen Suggs, Wendell Carter Jr. altercation with Andre Drummond, and how that's another small character moment for this team, kind of another subheader under things like the Desmond Bain shot this season, stuff like that. But this podcast has already run super long, so appreciate all of you that listen till the end. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.